Now that we've looked at our sample order output project, which processes packing slip data, we can look at our sample shipping label project to continue on in the two-sided thermal label printing series. To open our sample shipping label project, navigate to the main menu, and select File, Open Project, and under the Minisoft eFORMz 6 projects folder, which is created in the default installation of eFORMz, I've added a 2ST samples folder to put all of my files, and again you can get these files from a Minisoft support representative. Open that up and we can open the shipping label project by double clicking, and it will display in the eFORMz composer. Notice that for the most part the project looks similar to the packing slip project. There are some important differences that we'll go over, but in the viewer we see the data in the top pane coming in, and we see in the bottom pane the data as it will look when it is printed or outputted in any number of ways. To the left, in the top left, we have our project window, and this shows us the whole outline of what's going on in the project. And in the bottom left we have the variables window, which shows the variables and the data that they're picking up. Now, the first key difference to point out between the shipping label and packing slip project is that the shipping label project, as we can see, the data looks far different than it did in the packing slip project. And the reason for that is they're different input types. In the packing slip project, we were using extensible markup language, or XML, as data. In the shipping label project, as we see, we're using ZPL, our ship ZPL file. And that looks far different than the XML. And of course, if we look to the bottom, we'll notice here, if we scroll down, that for the most part, we've kept the ZPL as is. We have made a couple of minor changes, and we'll talk about how we did that in a moment. But how is it that the data looks one way at the top and it looks the exact same here? Well, if we navigate to our form properties by going to our project window and selecting the form, right-clicking and selecting Properties, General, the General tab will display. And as we see, like we talked about with the packing slip, we see the page size, and we support a variety of sizes for duplex pack slip labels. The orientation is portrait, and the other option, of course, is landscape, reverse portrait, reverse landscape. But we notice here that the Exclude Data checkbox is unchecked. This box was checked in the packing slip project because we were going to use the document template to move around our data. Not the case here with the shipping label. Since we're not going to make too many changes, we can leave this box unchecked because if we, of course, check it, as you see, the data is excluded from being placed on the form. But since, again, we're not making too many changes and we like where it is for the most part on our form, we can go back to our form properties, General, and leave it unchecked and keep it as is. That said, we can edit raw ZPL, and of course we have done so using variables and rules. Just a reminder, what is a variable? Variables store data for later use, and they can be used multiple times in a single project. They're extremely useful for a variety of reasons. To create a variable in the packing slip project, because it was XML, we simply right-clicked the data node and selected Add Variable. It's a little bit different with ZPL. What we'll do is we'll left-click and drag a string of characters, right-click and select Add Variable. And the variable dialog box will display. We can leave it as is, variable 1, and select OK. And we've got ourselves a new variable. And as we see, we have variable 1 over here in our project window. If we scroll down to our variables window, we see it's picking up 1 pound. So, with this variable, what we can do is we can place it on a form, on our label here. And how do we do that? Well, again, like we talked about in the packing slip video, there are two main ways of placing information onto a form or a label. And the first is the document template, which is a style guide for documents. And that places variables. It adjusts formatting, and you can add other content as well. And the real benefit is that the forms and labels move with incoming data. So it gives us pagination and repeatability, which are critical advantages in certain cases. The shipping labeling, on the other hand, is going to use the rule-based method to place variables. It doesn't have the flexibility of the document template, but it also doesn't have the learning curve, which makes it very good for dragging and dropping data to the desired location on a form or label. It can also enhance the function and appearance of output, similar to the document template. So, we've got our variable, we've highlighted it, created it. So now, what are we going to do with it to get it onto the form? We're going to use a rule. So, let's take our variable and right-click anywhere on our label here. Right-click, and we see the Add Rule, and let's select Place Text. And we can leave it as is, name Rule 1. And from the Use Variable drop-down, we can select the variable we created and select OK. The Place Text Action dialog box will display. You can maneuver the alignment. You can also change the font if you wanted to. For now, let's just accept the defaults. And there it is. We have ourselves a piece of information on our label. And what we can do is we can drag it around. As I'm showing here, just drag it wherever you like. You can put it there and everywhere, and you can have a whole bunch of fun doing that. And that's obviously a lot easier to use than the document template, and very, very helpful if you're only going to create a few variables and place a few things. You can use rules to add barcodes, images, and pretty much the same amount of content you would have in a document template. It's just a lot easier to create it. And again, the only downside is it doesn't have that repeatability and pagination. But if you don't need that, then the rule-based method works just fine. So we have ourselves a variable and rules. We have our raw ZPL here. Let's say we wanted to just move the whole thing up or down a little bit, like I showed in the packing slip video. It's the same here. We just go down to our data offsets down here, and we can move it any which way we'd like. If we wanted to move it down 150, there you go. Let's say I want to move it back up, throw a negative there, and then it moves up, and move it to the right, and do it 150, keep things consistent, there you go. And if we wanted to move it left, just throw a negative. And of course you can use the arrows if you would like. I'm just showing you somewhat of a shortcut because it's a lot easier than using the arrows. So we've moved it around a little bit, and let's remove that so we can actually see our information again. And there we go. So finally, what if you wanted to change this ZPL data file? Well, changing ZPL is a little more difficult than changing XML. We have provided a ship ZPL file. You can certainly use your own ZPL file if you would like, or your own whatever data file you're using for your shipping label. Simply by selecting Open Data near the top of the viewer, From File, OK, and you can find yourself a file. And again, I recommend, as I did in the packing slip video, to put files of type as all files, show it that it shows all of the files available for you to select. And click Cancel out of that. And of course you can edit the ZPL file if you so desire in a text editor, although again it's a lot more challenging than editing an XML file. Alright, now that we have looked at our shipping label project, we can take a look at how this whole process comes together. How do we take the packing slip and the shipping label, merge them, send them to the printer, or output as PDFs as we're going to be doing in this series? How do we do it? We'll take a look at that in our next video, where we get into the configuration file, composite data files, and the whole automated process.